And it came to pass, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said to Laban, "Send me away that I may go to my own place and to my own country. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served you, and let me go, for you know my service which I have done for you." So let's back up and give a little context. So after Rachel gave birth to her firstborn son, and again, Rachel was barren for some time, she finally gives birth to a son, and she named him Joseph. And so Jacob approaches his uncle Laban. He basically just requests permission for him to leave. Hey, Uncle Laban, I've been working for you for a long time. It's time for me to go home. And again, for context, Jacob had spent 14 years working for Leah, that he didn't know of, and then working for Rachel. And so he's been under Laban's thumb for quite a long time. And Jacob makes it clear to Laban, hey, I'm going with my family. I'm going with my wives. I'm going with my children, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. So that's what's happening so far. And again, Jacob reminds Laban, again, of his faithful service. I've served you many years. It's time for me to go. And in verse 27, we read, "And Laban said to him, 'Please stay, if I have found favor in your eyes, for I have learned by experience.'" That's a very magical, loosey-goosey term. "I've learned by the skies, by the entrails of animals, that the Lord has blessed me for your sake." Then he said, "Name your wages, and I will give it." We'll read verse 29. "So Jacob said to him, 'You know how I have served you, and how your livestock has been with me. For what you had before I came was little, and it was increased to a great amount. The Lord has blessed you since my coming, and now, when I shall also provide for my household, when shall I provide?'" So verse 31. "So he said, 'What shall I give you?' And in verse 33, "So my righteousness will answer for me in time to come, when the subject of my wages comes before you." Then verse 34, "And Laban said, 'Oh, that it were according to your word.' So he removed that day the male goats and the speckled and spotted, all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had some white in it, and all the brown ones among the lambs, and gave them into the hand of his sons. Then he put 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flock." So Laban, he urges Jacob, "Jacob, I know you really want to leave. Please don't leave." And Laban recognizes that since Jacob has come into the family, and since Jacob has worked for him, that Laban has been greatly blessed, his household, his businesses, and Laban doesn't want that to cease. And so he pleads with Jacob, "Please stay." And he says, I'll give you whatever you desire. Name your price," is essentially what Laban is asking Jacob. So he asks Jacob to set his own price. And Jacob responds by reminding Laban how, since I've come in, again, your wealth has been greatly increased since my years of service. And Jacob, he proposes a very unusual agreement. Instead of Laban paying him money, he offers, "All right, how about this, uncle? I will continue to tend your sheep. I'll continue to tend your flocks. However, any goats or any sheep that are speckled or spotted or dark colored, those flocks belong to me." So Laban would have kept all the plain, pure, quote unquote, animals, and Jacob would have gotten those that were speckled, spotted, or dark colored. And Laban quickly agrees. And so he separates, if you read closely, he separated the animals. They shake hands on him. He said, "All right, you'll get all the brown goats, and I'll keep all the white ones." But then he tells his sons, "Hey, take all this, the spotted, the speckled, and the dark colored, and go 3 days' journey." And now we read that Laban, once again, is conniving Jacob. They agree on a plan, and you can imagine when Jacob goes out, says, "All right, where's my flock?" Laban says, "What flock?" It's like the speckled and the dark-colored flock. "Oh, I don't know where they are." Again, Uncle Laban conniving Jacob once again. Now, verse 37. "Now Jacob took for himself rods of green poplar, like poplar forest, and of the almond and the chestnut trees, peeled white strips in them, and exposed the white which was in the rods. And the rods which he peeled he set before the flocks, the flocks in the gutters and the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink, so that they should conceive when they came to drink. So the flocks conceived before the rods, and the flocks brought forth streaked, speckled, and spotted. Then Jacob separated the lambs and made the flocks face toward the streaked and all the brown in the flock of Laban. And he put his own flocks by themselves and did not put them with Laban's flock. And it came to pass, whenever the stronger livestock conceived, that Jacob placed the rods before the eyes of the livestock in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the flocks were feeble, he did not put them in. So the feebler were Laban's and the stronger Jacob's. Thus the man became exceedingly prosperous and had large flocks, female and male servants, and camels and donkeys. It's a little interesting section, kind of hard to wrap your mind of what's happening. So Jacob, he devises a plan. So again, Laban has just cheated him. He said, they agreed, I'm going to get all the speckled and the spotted and the streaked flock. Laban says, no, you're not. I'm going to send them away, and then you have nothing left. But Jacob is still under control of Laban's flock, the rest of his flock. And so Jacob comes up with this method. So as we read, he takes branches from these trees, like chestnut tree, almond, poplar trees, and he peels sections of bark to make it have the rods look as a streaked appearance. And he places these rods in the watering trough. Now, a watering trough is where the animals would drink. And as the animals came to drink, this is also where they would conceive. And it says that many of the offspring became streaked, speckled, and spotted. Now, is it these peeled branches and sticks that made these animals streaked, spotted, and dark? I don't think so. We're going to read later on, this is the Lord. It's the angel of the Lord doing this. I think it's like the mangroves in the last chapter. Like, if you have these mangroves, you'll become pregnant. No, it's just more so like an aphrodisiac. But since Jacob's agreement with Laban, again, was that he would keep all the spotted and the speckled animals, they would belong to him, he started breeding them more often. So Laban, let's say he had 100, pure flock, but then the more he conceived, one speckled flock came out, and then he would conceive over and over again with those specific animals, and then Jacob's flock became bigger and bigger. There's something I want to harp on and expound upon this. Jacob acted shrewdly, S-H-W-R-E-D, shrewdly. Yeah, and Jacob acted with wisdom, and rather than being kind of passive to his unfair assignment that Laban has given to Jacob, instead, Jacob worked wisely within the circumstances, and the Lord caused his efforts to prosper. And again, where do we find Jacob? They agreed on a principle. They agreed on this contract. Laban breaks the contract. Now Jacob has no flocks. But he understood the difficult situation he's in. And instead of wallowing, he becomes shrewd. And Jesus as well, which again I'll expound upon, the Lord calls us to be shrewd when it comes to our life and how we handle circumstances and difficult people in our life. We all have interactions with difficult people in our life. What does it mean to be shrewd? It means to be cunning, to be artful, and thinking outside the box, having good judgment. As you all know, believers, we're all called to be meek. That's what Jesus says. Hey, be meek. Be in self-control. But Jesus also calls us to be good stewards, and I don't think these are combating one another. I think these work perfectly in harmony with one another. He calls us to be good stewards and be shrewd when it comes to our dealings. Thinking outside the box, be artful, be cunning. Needless to say, guys, we're not called to be pushovers. I think Christians can get a bad rap. Christians, you can just tell them what to do and they'll do it, and they won't push back at all. But we're not called to be pushovers. We're not called to. Christians can never say no. They just have to accept and say yes and then continue on. Or Christians, we just have to accept defeats, without walking in discernment. Or, we're not just allowed, or we should not just allow ourselves, I should say, to be cheated or constantly taken advantage of or living recklessly. And again, I'll expound upon that point specifically here in a bit. We're not called just to, just be mild and never be an extremist when it comes to living out the gospel and sharing the gospel. But instead, as Jesus says, and again, I'll give up some principles and verses for this, but we're all called to navigate our life with wisdom and with courage and with discernment and responding faithfully without capitulating every time circumstances get hard. Jacob, and again, we can all see, Jacob was a lot of things. Again, he was a heel catcher. He was a stinky thief. He was a conniver. He was flawed, definitely impatient at times, deceptive. But one thing that stands out, and you could even argue is commendable, is that he was shrewd. His shrewdness, again, was evident in how he managed the flocks, turning what seemed, this is a very unfair situation I found myself in, into a period of blessing and growth. Jacob didn't act recklessly or passive, but he observed, all right, I see what you've done, Uncle Laban. He planned and he executed wisely, maximizing the Lord's provision without, I think, overstepping the Lord's principles, which he's laid out for us. What does this mean? Well, this shows that the Lord can use our discernment, the Lord can use our strategic thinking to prosper us, even in difficult circumstances. In Luke chapter 16, if you all have taken notes, write this down. Luke chapter 16, it's an interesting parable, the parable of the shrewd master. Now, Jesus loves to give parables. And so Jesus, he's talking to his disciples, and he says, there is this rich man. And this rich man had a manager. And he found out the manager was being really reckless and wasting his money. And so he tells the manager, hey, your 2 weeks are coming up. And after 2 weeks, sorry, you're going to be let go. And so the manager hears about this and decides, all right, I got to go to everyone who owes my master money. And he goes to one and he says, hey, I know you owe, let's say, $800. How about you just pay $400? And the guy's like, oh, of course, yeah, thank you so much for giving me a discount. And then he goes to another one of his master's debtors and says, hey, I know you owe $1,000. How about you just pay $800? Wow, thank you so much. And by lowering the debt, the manager made these people grateful to him. Because, again, what's about to happen to the manager in 2 weeks? He's about to lose his job. But then when he comes back to these people, they're going to think, oh, wow, yeah, of course you can have a job. Of course I will give you money. And the rich man commended the manager, not specifically for his dishonesty, but for being shrewd, for having that intelligence and understanding and insight. There are a lot of people who are shrewd. I had fun thinking about, everyday characters that are shrewd. Think of Aladdin. Aladdin is a very shrewd guy. Very street smart type of dude, lives on the streets, very clever, knows how to turn a bad situation for his advantage. Think of, even if you've seen Marvel, Loki. Very shrewd. He's actually called the god of mischief. I think he's like textbook shrewd. And again, yes, is he manipulative? Yes, he is. But he's clever. And again, what's the point? He's able to turn situations to his advantage. What about Scar? From the Lion King. Again, like Loki, he uses manipulation. He's very cunning to seize the throne and to put Simba in danger. Sorry to spoil it for you. While morally corrupt, Scar is also undeniably shrewd. What's the point to the parable I just gave? Jesus explains the point. People in this world often act more strategically and wisely for the future than God's people do. In Matthew 10, verse 16, the Lord says, hey, you're going out to war. You're going to be sheep among wolves. So here's the thing. This is what Jesus says. Be as wise as doves. Be as innocent as doves. And we can all agree with that. Yeah, we need to be wise. We need to be innocent. We need to be gentle. But he also says, don't forget the last part of the verse, be as shrewd as snakes. Jesus says that. Be innocent? Yes. But be shrewd. Now, am I going to counsel someone and say what Jacob did was right and you should do that in your own family? I don't know, but the Bible doesn't say he did anything wrong, nor does it say he did anything right. I think we need to be careful at saying what Jacob did was wrong. Well, it doesn't say that. We can do that with David. What David did was so wrong. Well, the Bible doesn't say anything about it. And I think for Jacob too. Jacob, again, for context, he's been working for Laban for years, close to 2 decades. And he knows Laban is deceptive. He knows Laban is cunning. And again, what did Laban switched his bride on his wedding night? Hopefully that never happens to you. It's pretty messed up. And so instead of Jake becoming passive and accepting the situation and wallowing, oh no, Laban has cheated me again. I guess there's nothing I can do. He acted wisely within the agreement he has made. And again, to parallel the parable with Jesus, Jacob recognized the situation he was in, and he acted strategically rather than passively. I guess there's nothing I can do about it. I guess I just have no flock, and I'll just be here for the rest of my days. And the point, I'm going to make this clear. The point is not that believers, we should be manipulative or dishonest, but the Lord says, do not lie. But that God's people, we need to be wise. We need to walk in discernment and thoughtful in how we're navigating life circumstances. The shrewd manager, again, he used this opportunity wisely before his position changed. Jacob walked in wisdom. He used strategy in a difficult arrangement with Laban. And I think both illustrate an important truth. That God's people, we're not called to be passive, nonchalant, naive. We're just going to we're just going to let it happen. We can often hide passivity for faith. It's just faith we're having. We just got to walk through it. No, you're just being lazy. But we're called to act in wisdom and discernment and have that foresight, trusting in the Lord's blessing and protection. And guys, how many of y'all have ever walked through a difficult time in your life? It's like most of us. Maybe you are walking through a difficult time in your life currently. You're walking through difficulty. Maybe you find yourself in an unfavorable position, a place in your life. Don't just throw up your hands and say, I guess it's just meant to be. I guess Laban was just supposed to cheat me, and I was just going to be here for the rest of my days. No, the Lord promises. We just read this in James. The Lord promises to give us wisdom from above, especially through those difficult circumstances. So I think the point I really want to drive home is make the most out of the place you are in. Don't be passive. Don't be nonchalant. Don't just be going through the motions. I guess Laban will just have the better flock than me, and I can't do anything. Oh, well. No, be creative. Be creative. Seek the Lord. Use, like Aladdin, use your street smarts to get an advantage. And be shrewd. Again, while walking in the statutes of the Lord. And once again, Jesus, he's commending a dishonest manager. That's the point. He's like, by the way, yeah, he lied. I applaud him for his shrewdness. Again, not for his dishonesty. He's pointing out about his mindset, that he was clever, he was strategic, he was intentional. And when he realized that I'm about to be fired in 2 weeks, he thought and he acted decisively to secure his future. Again, the word shrewd, it carries the idea of discernment, using careful judgment and the ability to navigate difficult situations for a specific desired income. Again, Jesus' point in that parable is that the world, unbelievers, will be more shrewd than believers. They'll be more intentional, have better strategy in pursuing their goals than believers do when it comes to pursuing the things of the Lord and in their life. And so as followers of Christ, especially when it comes to the work of ministry, we're called to be intentional. We're called to be thoughtful. We're not called to be weak. We're not called to be passive. We're not called to be careless. Whether that's, a dad, I just can't find a job. Maybe the Lord doesn't have anything for us. Maybe you need to be shrewd about your doings. Again, I had to stop myself because there's so many examples of people in the Bible being shrewd, using that careful judgment, navigating situations for a desired income. Think of Joseph. Again, not trying to get ahead of myself in Genesis chapter 41. But a famine was coming. He interprets Pharaoh's dream. Basically, the dream is a famine is coming. There's not going to be any food at Sam's Club anymore. So this is what we need to do. We need to take part of the harvest and lay it, put it in a bunker. And so when the famine comes, we have enough food. That is being shrewd. And when a famine came, what happened? Joseph and Egypt, they were able to feed themselves and also the known world. That's being shrewd. The Hebrew midwives, when Pharaoh said, there are too much Hebrew boys, we need to kill all of them. And so he told the midwives, hey, kill the babies. Once a mother gives birth, you have to kill them immediately. And so the midwife said, okay. But they feared God more than Pharaoh. And they walked slowly to the houses when they got the phone call, hey, we're about to give birth. It's like, okay, we'll be there just in a little bit. And then Pharaoh said, hey, the baby boys are still being born. What's going on? Oh, the Hebrew women, they just give birth so fast and we can't be there. I'm sorry, Pharaoh. Again, being shrewd. Paul in the legal system, Acts chapter 22 through 25, they arrest Paul. He's about to be beaten and, potentially executed. And he says, I appeal to Caesar. It's like, well, you're a Roman citizen. Oh, Oh, okay. That's Paul being shrewd. Paul is just not accepting the fact, yeah, you can beat me and throw me into jail and torture me all you want. It's like, no, I'm gonna appeal to Caesar. And what happened? He was able to preach the gospel to Europe because of that. When Jesus sent out his disciples, guys, Jesus told them, don't take any extra provisions. Don't take an extra bag. Don't take extra money. Don't even take a sword. In Luke chapter 9. At that time, again, they were traveling. The Lord was providing for them. But near the end of his ministry, before Jesus was going to be arrested, Jesus has a little powwow with his disciples. And in Luke chapter 22, verse 36, Jesus says, he who has a money bag, let him take it. And he who has no sword, let him sell his garments and buy one. What is Jesus saying? Hey, get a bank account and get an AR-15 before July 1st. Why? Because you're going to hit some tribulations and some afflictions. Jesus was preparing them for a new reality because he was about to depart. They were going to face persecution. That's the whole book of Acts. They were going to face hostility and danger. Jesus was teaching them something important. I told you don't bring a sword, but now you need to go. If you don't have a sword, go buy one. You need to be prepared. You need to be aware. What do you use a sword for? To fight. Well, it's just for show. No. That's not what Jesus meant. You need to be aware. You need to be wise about the world you're entering. And I think, I had some time wrestling with this. I actually called a friend about this. But I think one of the dangers in the modern church today, and I don't want to bag on the church. I'm not going to be that teacher. But I think one of them is that many believers misunderstand meekness for passivity. But Scripture never teaches God's people that you need to be naive, careless, and taken advantage of. And in fact, it says quite the opposite. And again, I think many believers and Christians, they drift through life reacting through circumstances instead of strategically living for the purposes that God has. God has given us time, resources, relationships, and influence. As wise believers, we should think carefully how we can use those things for an eternal impact. So, to wrap it up, guys, especially this section, stop being a pushover if you are a pushover. And this goes to even your daily life. Too many believers allow themselves to be walked over or manipulated. And they say it's just being meek. For example, men, you're called to lead, especially when you all have families. You're called to lead. You're called to protect. You're called to provide, not just hope. And I hope someone fixes the leak. I hope I hope I get a job. No, do something about it. Women, you're called to guard your influence, to guard your home, to walk in dignity, not let every challenge just ragdoll you and kowtow. Meekness is under control. Meekness is not exploitation. I just got to be exploited for Jesus Christ. Show me a verse for that, first and foremost. Stop excusing laziness as faith. I'm just not going to do anything. That's not what Jacob did. I think Jacob is a really good example of, I'm in this difficult situation, and I've been cheated, I've been manipulated, but how am I going to use this? And the Lord blessed him in that regard. So stop using laziness as faith. God blesses faithful action. Our leader, Greg Farrell, likes to say this: God does not reward laziness. God blesses faithful action. The Lord does not bless excuses. This you can even go down to, it's just the family I live in. I live in this part of town. I live in 24501, and I go to this school, and it's just really hard, and I'll never get up in life, and I don't go to a prestigious school or a private school. I'm not like those people. That's the victim mentality that I don't think the Lord likes. Be shrewd in your doings. Men and women alike. If you're a passive, if you're even reactive or naive, you're wasting the Lord's resources. Faith is not a free pass to be walked over. And again, we'll talk about this here in a bit, but the Lord protects those who trust in him. But he also blesses those who act wisely and strategically and wise discernment. So my point is, stop being passive if you are passive. Stop being naive. Start being shrewd, intentional, and faithful. Let's go on. Verse 1. of chapter 31. Now Jacob heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what our father he has acquired all this wealth. And Jacob saw the countenance of Laban, and indeed it was not favorable toward him as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field to his flock, and said to them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not favorable toward me as before. But the God of my father has been with me. And you know that with all my might I have served your father, yet your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not allow him to hurt me. That 10 times, some commentators were saying it's not a literal 10 times. Some were saying it's just, he's a billion times he's changed my language. So it seems to be a perpetual thing that Laban liked to do with Jacob. We'll skip to verse 11. Read back to the verses I skipped. They're important. Verse 11. Then the angel of the God spoke to me in a dream, saying to Jacob, and I said, here I am. And he said, lift your eyes now, and see all the rams which leap on the flocks are streaked, speckled, and gray spotted. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, again, Bethel, the house of the Lord, where you anointed the pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now arise, get out of this land, and return to the land of your family. So Laban and his sons, they start to grow a little jealous over Jacob. Why? Because Jacob is doing this breeding scheme, and the Lord is blessing him, and now his flock is just as big as Laban's and his sons, and he has servants and donkeys and sheep and cattle, and they start to become envious. It's like he's prospering more than we. And then in the midst of this tension going on in this family, the Lord speaks to Jacob and tells him, Jake, yes, here I am. It's time. It's time to go. Pack your bags and go to the land of your fathers, the father Abraham and Isaac. So Jacob, he gathers his family and explained that, it's time for me to go. The Lord's telling me to go. Uncle Laban has changed my pay like 10 times, 1,000 times, but it's time to go home now. But even though Laban had tried to cheat him, the Lord's favor had still been with Jacob. And so in the Lord, we read, he confirms this calling in a dream. And he recalls seeing his flocks, the streaks speckled and spotted. And the Lord reveals, hey, by the way, it wasn't you peeling bark and putting sticks in water. It was me who was giving the blessing. And in the dream, the Lord reminds Jacob of his faithfulness and rest assured that, hey, you're going to return to your land. Verse 14. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, again, Laban's daughters, is there still any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not considered strangers by him? For he has sold us and also completely consumed our money. For all these riches which God has taken from our father are really ours and our children's. Now, then, whatever God has said to you, do it. Verse 19. Now Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the household idols that were her father's. So Rachel and Leah, again, they have this meeting out in the field. You don't want to have this meeting in the house because Laban could be right around the corner. Jacob says, it's time to go. Your father's changed my mind countless of times, and I'm done. And Rachel and Leah, again, Jacob's talking bad about their daddy. And Rachel and Leah said, you know what, Jacob? Again, they were also connivers as well. I think you're right. We have no inheritance. He's basically sold off our inheritance for whatever, our dowry, whatever it might have been. And so they recognize that. And so once his wives are on board, Jacob, he rises, he gathers his possessions, and he prepares to leave in a haste. But before departing, again, in verse 19, it says that Rachel secretly took her father's household gods. Again, why is she doing this? Maybe to preserve the family legacy. Let me just take a little something so I can remember Dad. And with everything ready, Jacob and his family, they set out, again, beginning the journey back to the land of his fathers. Verse 22. And Laban was told on the third day that Jacob had fled. Then he took his brethren with him and pursued him for 7 days' journey. And he overtook him in the mountains of Gilead. By the way, this is a different route that Jacob went. So Jacob is going like in the bayou. Like Laban will never find us here if we go this route. That's why Moses is trying to hone in on the place where Jacob was. But God had came to Laban, the Syrian, in a dream by night and said to him, Be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad. So Laban overtook Jake, and Jake had pitched his tent in the mountains, and Laban with his brethren pitched the mountains of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done that you have stolen away unknown to me, and carried away my daughters like captives, taking the sword? Why did you flee secretly and steal away from me, and not tell me? For I might have sent you away with joy and songs, with timbrel and harp. And you did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters." His sons, that would have been his grandkids, like Joseph and Dan and so on and so forth. "Now you have done foolishly in so doing. It is in my power to do you harm. But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, 'Be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad.' And now you have surely gone because you greatly long for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods?" So 3 days later, after Jacob had left, Jacob discovers that his family has ditched him. And they have departed, and so Laban's like, all right, no, we got to go after them. And again, Laban just wants Jacob because every time Jacob is around, blessing is happening in his family. And before Laban catches up to Jacob, Laban has this dream, and it's the Lord telling him, hey, essentially, don't lay a hand on Jacob. And when Laban finally reaches him, he confronts him and says, hey, why'd you leave such in a hurry? You got to imagine Laban. Again, Laban, he'll do over you. He's like, Jacob, why'd you leave? We could have thrown a party for you. I could have brought the drums and the guitar. We could have celebrated. I know you want to go back to your father's household. That's how Laban is speaking. And he expressed that, I didn't even say goodbye to my grandkids and my daughters. And you can imagine Rachel and Leah like, yeah, okay. But then Laban says, but the Lord told me not to lay a hand on you. But I must ask, why did you steal my gods? And then verse 31, then Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid. For I said, perhaps you would take your daughters from me by force. With whomever you find your gods, do not let him live. In the presence of our brethren, identify what I have of yours and take it with you. For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, and to the two maids' tents, but he did not find them. Then he went out of the tent, Leah's tent, and entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household idols, put them in the camel saddle, and sat on them. And Laban searched all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, let it not displease my lord, that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of women is with me. And he searched, but did not find the household idols. So Laban says, hey, I'm not going to cause any harm. Again, I just want to ask, why did you steal my little idols? And Jacob says, all right, to address the first thing, I left in a hurry because I was afraid that you would have prevented me. You would have deceived me once again. And then Jacob says, but to the idol thing, I don't have your idols. None of us have your idols. So, and Laban's like, I don't know. They were there. All right. So Jacob says, if someone has your idols, if someone stole them from you, you can kill that person. You can imagine Rachel just kind of dripping a little sweat. So Laban says, all right, men, tear the camp. Look for the little gods and idols. And Rachel, she puts the idols in a camel's bag and sits on them. And then after they're done searching Leah, her sister's tent, they come into Rachel's tent, and Rachel says, it's the way of women, which is the euphemism. You probably know what that means. And then Laban says, oh, my bad. Okay. And he gets out, and Rachel successfully hides the idols from Laban. Verse 36, then Jacob was angry and rebuked Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin that you have done so hotly pursued me? Although you have searched all my things, what part of your household things have you found? Set it here before my brethren and your brethren, that they may judge between us both. These 20 years I have been with you. We'll go to verse 41. I've served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10,000 times. Unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac have been with me, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hand and rebuked you last night. So after years of tension, and again, it's just boiling, it's boiling. And Laban searches the camp, he ransacks it and says, all right, Jacob, you're right. I guess I just misplaced them. And it just boils over. It says Jacob spoke to his uncle, his father-in-law, in anger. So, all right, Laban, I've had enough of you. And Jacob reminds Laban, you have wronged me countless of times. You've changed my wages 10 times. Has it really been? Yes, it has. You've changed my wages. You've manipulated me over the years. Yet, despite all the difficulties, Jacob acknowledged, but it's the Lord who's been with me. And again, you can kind of see Jacob starting to morph from a sneaky thief to starting to become Israel, which we'll read next week. Nope, 2 weeks from now. Jacob's anger towards Laban, again, it didn't happen all at once. It didn't happen in a vacuum. But it took years. Again, Laban had schemed. He had cheated Jacob. He had tried to take advantage of him. Yet Jacob was never left unprotected. Even when Laban changed his wages repeatedly, God watched over him and blessed him with wealth, blessed him with his flocks. I think I have a slide for this. I think this shows a very key principle and a key truth that the Lord protects and the Lord will lead and guide those who trust in him, even when others try to get in the way. The Lord is for you guys. Who can be against you? And if you're walking in his statutes and if you're walking in his commands and you're abiding in the Lord, the things of this life that will come against you will have no chance in succeeding. Again, you imagine Jacob, you've robbed me. You switched a rude my wife on my wedding night. But guess what? The Lord's been with me. And the Lord has blessed me. Even when you try to put your little oily hands all over my life. Here's the thing, guys, and you'll probably know this, that life is full of people and situations that will try to take advantage of us, to harm us, to cheat us, to tempt us, whatever that might be. And for believers, the temptation, I should say, for the believers is often to react in fear and anger or passivity, thinking that, we're just at the mercy of circumstances. This is nothing we can do. We will always be cheated. The Bible says something different, though. It teaches that the Lord is an active protector. The Lord's an active God, especially for those who put their trust in him. See how wide our river is and how long our bridge is. Well, think of Daniel. In Daniel chapter 6, Daniel's in Babylon. And he's walking into statutes of the Lord, and his enemies notice this. The council of the king. They say, all right, Daniel's such a goody two-shoes. How can we get him thrown into prison? How can we kill him? So let's make prayer illegal. Imagine someone had to make prayer illegal, and then you would be thrown into jail. Shows the man that Daniel was. So they make prayer illegal, and Daniel is caught praying. And what happens? He's thrown into the lion's den. But guess what? The Lord protected him. The Lord blessed Daniel, shutting the mouths of lions, vindicating Daniel's faithfulness. Esther chapter 4-7, Esther in Persia. Haman plotted to destroy the Jews, but God, the Lord, guided Esther and gave her courage and planning. And her uncle Mordecai, or cousin Mordecai. And through wisdom and timing, the Lord protected Esther and her people. As believers, guys, we're inevitably going to enter deception. People will try to deceive you. Life will try to take advantage of you. You will face manipulation. You probably will face some type of injustice and betrayal, sometimes from friends, sometimes from family, or those in positions of authority. And again, the natural reaction is to fight. Maybe it's to complain or to just wallow in despair. The Lord calls us to something higher, and that's persistent trust. I was thinking about this verse Sunday night. In Job had a tremendous loss. Job lost everything. His children died because the house, fell upon them, and then his cattle and his livelihood was taken away from him. His health was taken away from him. Everything was taken away from him. And he says, though the Lord slay me, I will hope in him. I will trust in the Lord. Even after tremendous loss and betrayal and even false accusations, Job probably sinned against the Lord. Job refused to curse God. Yeah, I'm going through this hardship and betrayal. I don't know why this is happening to me. And what happened in the end of Job's life? The Lord restored and the Lord blessed Job beyond his former life. What does that demonstrate? Well, it demonstrates that persistent trust leads to ultimate vindication. Trust in who? Trust in the Lord, my friend. Coming to the end, verse 43. And Laban answered and said to Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and this flock is my flock. All that you see is mine. But what can I do this day to these my daughters, or their children whom they have borne? Now therefore, come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. Then Jacob said to his brethren, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there on the heap. We'll stop right there. So Laban, he acknowledges Jacob's rights, and he essentially releases him. And he says, by the way, Jacob, all of this is mine. Your wives, these children are mine. Everything, these flocks are mine. But it's time. And he proposes a covenant, a formal witness to protect both parties. And so Jacob establishes a stone pillar as a covenant witness. In the last couple verses, 51 through 55. Then Laban said to Jake, here's the heap, here's this pillar which I have placed between you and me. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness that I will not pass beyond this heap to you. And you will not pass beyond this heap and this pillar to me for harm. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, and the God of their father judge between us. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and called his brethren to eat bread. And they ate bread and stayed all night on the mountain. And early in the morning, Laban arose and kissed his sons and his daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned to his place. No more Uncle Laban. So Jacob and Laban, they erect a stone, a monument, and basically say, hey, if you cross this line, you're going to die. If I cross this line, I'm going to die. All right, they'll shake hands upon it. And Jacob offers a sacrifice on the mountain. They share a meal together, again, formulating the covenant affirmation. And then in the morning, Laban rises up. He kisses his daughters and his grandkids. Say, bye, grandkids. Grandpa won't be back for a little bit. And he departs to Haran permanently. So Jacob's story, Jacob's account, again, it shows a crucial principle. That God's people are protected, but that doesn't mean that they are called to passivity. Guys, even in the face of deception or manipulation or being cheated upon or repeated injustice, very much like Jacob's life, we're called to act in wisdom and discernment and have that strategic planning. And the Lord blessed him, and the Lord also protected him. God's favor, guys, is visible over time. And what may look unfair, which, you're on Instagram or the news for 2 seconds and you see unfairness or supposedly unfairness. Or what looks impossible, like Laban's schemes, those things cannot thwart God's promises to those who trust them. So number one, if you're taking notes, trust God, trust the Lord, but act wisely. Number two, meekness is not weakness. Being gentle, which the Lord calls us to be gentle, the Lord calls us to be self-controlled, that doesn't mean we're being a pushover. So meekness is not weakness. Number three, the Lord protects his own. I think that's probably the overarching principle in this. Yeah, you may be cheated, you might be going through the rough of it, but the Lord is there, and the Lord will vindicate you. Number four, be shrewd. Use your resources, use relationships and influence. Again, not just for your own selfish gain, but for the Lord's purposes and extending his kingdom.